Born on November 27, 1940 in San Francisco's Chinatown, and named Legion Fan in the Chinese tradition, he entered the world in the year and hour of the dragon, symbols tied to power and destiny. A nurse gave him the American name Bruce before he even left the hospital. His father, Li Hoi Chuen, was an actor with a travelling Chinese opera troupe. His mother, Grace Ho, cared for Bruce and his siblings, Phoebe, Agnes, Peter, and Robert. When Bruce was only a few months old, the family returned to Hong Kong, where his father resumed his performing career. Bruce grew up in the shadows of stage curtains and film sets, absorbing the rhythms of performance from his earliest days. By childhood, he had already appeared in 20 films, revealing natural ease and presence before the camera. At home, Bruce was a whirlwind of energy. His family called him Mo Si Ting, meaning never sit still. School did little to restrain him. English lessons proved difficult, and his restless nature pulled him toward the streets. When his mother once asked how he intended to build a future, Bruce replied without hesitation. He would become a famous film star, yet without direction, his energy turned destructive. Bruce drifted into gang life, leading a small group known as the Tigers. Street fights became frequent and trouble followed. Years later, he would describe himself as a stubborn and aggressive boy, often at odds with authority. Everything shifted after Bruce lost a street fight at 13. The defeat humbled him and forced him to face the direction his life was heading. Determined to pursue discipline instead of trouble, he turned to the world of kung fu, setting in motion a path that would shape his body, sharpen his mind, and define his future. In 1954, he began formal training in kung fu under the respected Hong Kong teacher Yip Man, adopting the Cantonese spelling he preferred. Under Yip Man's instruction, Bruce developed rapidly, gaining skill and focus. However, the deeper lessons of restraint were still beyond his grasp. His power grew, but his temper followed, and although he could now win fights, he had not yet learned when to avoid them, leading to more clashes in school hallways and on the streets after class. By 1958, his reputation for fighting was impossible to ignore. One of his teachers, seeking a more constructive outlet for Bruce's energy, encouraged him to enter an inter-school boxing tournament. Bruce agreed. He stepped into the ring and quickly overwhelmed his opponents, knocking out several challengers in the first round. In the final match, he faced Gary Elms, a British student who had dominated the tournament for 3 consecutive years. Bruce defeated him in the third round, securing the championship and proving his skill under formal rules. His movements in the ring were smooth, fast, and precise. That same fluidity made him a gifted dancer. At the same time he earned his boxing title, Bruce also became a cha-cha champion in Hong Kong, mastering rhythm and balance as naturally as he mastered combat. But his temper still led him into danger. At 18, Bruce became involved in a serious street fight that brought the police to the Lee family home. An officer who knew Bruce well issued a stark warning. If Bruce continued down this path, prison would be the next step. His parents understood that a decisive change was needed. In a difficult but necessary decision, they chose to send their son back to the United States, confident that he would find safety, education, and a fresh beginning far from Hong Kong's street gangs. A family friend in Seattle, who owned a restaurant, agreed to provide Bruce with a room above the establishment and work as a waiter. In April 1959, Bruce boarded a ship to San Francisco. From there, he travelled north to Seattle and soon enrolled at the University of Washington. A school counselor, recognizing his curiosity and restless mind, encouraged him to study philosophy. Bruce embraced the subject. Through it, he began to question the world and himself. He asked what victory truly meant, what glory represented, and why he had once been driven to prove himself through violence. Philosophy reshaped him. Bruce came to believe that the true aim of training was not to start a fight, but to avoid one by being prepared, aware, and in control. While still a student, he shared his knowledge of Kung Fu with friends. At first, he taught informally and without payment. Before long, people urged him to open a proper school. In 1963, at the age of 22, Bruce founded the Junfan Kung Fu Institute in Seattle. His teachings were already evolving. He told his students that martial arts were not only about defense, but also about personal expression through movement. Among his students was Linda Emery. Bruce asked her on a date in October 1963, and the two quickly formed a bond. Though Linda's parents at first hesitated, unsure about their future, Bruce and Linda were certain of their choice. Linda later described Bruce as a man of quality, integrity, love, and warmth. Bruce felt the same. "Linda and I aren't one and one," he said. "We are two halves that make a whole. Two halves fitted together are more efficient than either half would ever be alone." By August 17th, 1964, Bruce's life was moving quickly. He married Linda in Seattle, and the birth of their son Brandon the following year strengthened their growing family. Eager for fresh opportunities, they relocated to Oakland, where Bruce opened a second school and continued shaping a new approach to martial arts, one that moved beyond tradition and challenged long-standing conventions. That same year, while Bruce delivered a stunning demonstration at the first international karate tournament in Long Beach, he caught the eye of Jay Sebring, a prominent Hollywood hairstylist with industry connections. Sebring shared what he had witnessed with producer William Dozier, setting in motion an introduction that would launch the next major chapter of Bruce Lee's journey. Producers are the unseen architects of film and television, responsible for shaping projects, selecting talent, and guiding a production from concept to screen. William Dozier was one of the most prominent producers of his era. His voice became familiar to millions as the narrator of the 1960s Batman television series, announcing lines such as, "Meanwhile, back in the villain's hideout, and tune in next time, same bat time, same bat channel." Dozier's first attempt to bring Bruce into television was through a new series featuring the fictional detective Charlie Chan. Bruce was hired to play Chan's son, but the project collapsed before it reached the air. Still, Dozier remembered Bruce's presence, and when another opportunity emerged, he returned to him with a new offer. The project was The Green Hornet, an action series adapted from an earlier radio and comic book hero created in the same era that gave rise to Batman. Dozier wanted Bruce for the role of Kato, the hero's driver, bodyguard, and partner in the fight against crime. Bruce hesitated. For decades, Asian characters in American entertainment had been reduced to stereotypes, either portrayed as caricatures or played by white actors using forced accents. Bruce had no interest in repeating those roles. As he put it, earlier scripts were filled with arsos and chop-chops, lines that insulted both the culture and the audience. Linda Lee would later explain, that was his rule. He would not take any role that demeaned Chinese culture. Dozier assured Bruce that Kato would be different. The character would be intelligent, capable, and heroic, defined not by cliché but by skill and integrity. Confident in that promise, Bruce accepted the part, and the Lee family moved to Los Angeles, where the series would be filmed. When The Green Hornet premiered, American audiences saw something entirely new. At 25, Bruce Lee brought authentic martial arts to US television for the first time. His speed astonished viewers and even confounded the camera. One story claimed he could snatch a coin from a person's open palm, replace it with another, and withdraw his hand before the fingers closed. On set, his movements were often so fast the camera failed to capture them cleanly. The production team had to ask him to deliberately slow down his fighting sequences because they feared audiences would believe his speed was a special effect. Ironically, as the show gained attention, Kato began to overshadow the Green Hornet himself. Viewers were drawn to Bruce's presence, skill, and charisma. That popularity, however, worked against the series. After only one season, The Green Hornet was cancelled, and once again Bruce found himself without a steady role. Still, he and his family chose to remain in Los Angeles. Hollywood was there, and so were his ambitions. Over the next few years, he appeared in a series of supporting roles. In 1967 and 1968, he portrayed martial arts instructors in the television drama Ironside and in the comedy Blondie. He later guest-starred in the Western series Here Come the Brides as a Chinese immigrant, and took on a villainous role in the film Marlowe starring James Garner. The most memorable moment of that film featured Bruce leaping high into the air to kick a ceiling light, shattering it in a single strike. Although Bruce began appearing on screen, the breakthrough he wanted continued to slip out of reach. Hollywood was not yet willing to cast an Asian actor as a leading man, and by the late 1960s he found himself at a crossroads, unsure whether his future belonged in film or back in the world of teaching martial arts. Yet even in this period of uncertainty, his impact was growing. His role as Kato on the Green Hornet introduced millions of Americans to martial arts for the first time, sparking widespread fascination with his speed, precision, and the philosophy behind his movements. The word kung fu entered American culture, and although Bruce still struggled to claim the spotlight he deserved, the momentum he inspired signaled that his greatest opportunities were still ahead. After The Green Hornet was cancelled, Bruce returned to teaching in order to support his growing family. Bruce and Linda continued raising their young son Brandon, who eagerly imitated his father's movements. In 1969, their family grew again with the birth of their daughter, Shannon. As Bruce resumed his work as an instructor, his reputation spread rapidly through Hollywood. Actor James Coburn sought his guidance. So did Steve McQueen, one of the biggest stars of the era. A well-known director even flew Bruce to Switzerland for private instruction. 7-foot 2-inch basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar also became his student and later his friend. Years afterward, Bruce would cast Abdul-Jabbar as an opponent in one of his films, a testament to their shared respect. Bruce also began choreographing martial arts sequences for motion pictures, designing action scenes and training actors to perform them believably. One such film was The Wrecking Crew, starring Dean Martin. Bruce personally taught Martin how to incorporate kung fu into his role. Hollywood professionals wanted to learn from the best, and Bruce stood at the pinnacle of his craft. Yet not everyone approved of his teaching. Opposition came from two directions. The first complaint concerned who Bruce chose to instruct. For centuries, Chinese martial arts had been taught only to Chinese students. Many traditionalists condemned Bruce for sharing knowledge with Westerners, believing that he was exposing cultural secrets. When Bruce opened a studio in Oakland, a group of traditional Chinese instructors challenged him. They declared that if their chosen fighter defeated him, Bruce must stop teaching non-Chinese students. Bruce accepted, won decisively, and kept his doors open to all. He believed martial arts belonged to anyone willing to study with sincerity. The second source of controversy was what Bruce taught. He rejected the idea that any single martial art was superior in every situation. Real combat, he argued, was unpredictable, with no regard for stances, styles, or ceremonial rules. The proper method is the one that works, he declared. Bruce began stripping away what he believed were unnecessary traditions, blending effective elements from many disciplines and simplifying them into a direct and fluid approach. He called this philosophy Jeet Kune Do, meaning the way of the intercepting fist. But Bruce resisted treating it as a fixed system. He disliked labels. Jeet Kune Do is merely a name used, he said. A boat to get one across the river, and once across it is to be discarded. To Bruce, martial arts were a path to personal expression, not confinement. He often explained that a fighter must not be limited by his background, whether Chinese, Japanese, or Western. The goal was adaptability. To illustrate, he used a simple comparison. A boxer needs space to strike with reach and impact. A wrestler must close distance to control his opponent. If the two face each other, the other can rely solely on his training. Victory requires flexibility. The same, Bruce insisted, was true in any real confrontation. If the enemy is cool, stay cooler than him. If the enemy moves, move faster than him. Although Bruce trained with relentless intensity, he rarely stepped into real combat after his youth, embracing the ancient wisdom of Sun Tzu that true victory comes from subduing an opponent without fighting. He echoed this belief years later on film, calling it the art of fighting without fighting, convinced that genuine mastery meant avoiding conflict altogether. Yet destiny had other plans, preparing to place him on screen as the most iconic martial arts fighter the world had ever seen. Then, in 1970, everything nearly ended. While lifting weights, Bruce felt a sudden sharp pain in his lower back that grew worse by the day until it became unbearable. A medical examination delivered crushing news. He had permanently injured a nerve in his spine, and doctors warned that his martial arts career was over. For a man whose life was defined by movement, the prescription was unthinkable. Bruce was ordered to bed for 3 months of complete rest. For the next 3 months after that, he remained unable to train. Half a year passed with Bruce Lee unable to practice the art that had shaped his identity. In every big thing or achievement there are always obstacles, he would later write. The reaction one shows to such obstacles is what counts, not the obstacle itself. Now the obstacle was his own body. For the first time in his life, Bruce could not fight, teach, or train, but he refused to surrender to despair. Instead of allowing stillness to break him, he used it to transform himself. From that bed, Bruce turned inward, developing the philosophy that would ultimately define him as deeply as his physical skill. He read constantly, filling his days with study. Bruce had amassed a personal library of more than 2,500 books, exploring philosophy, psychology, martial arts, religion, and the nature of human potential. He questioned, reflected, and wrote page after page of notes. His thoughts on discipline, awareness, and self-expression would later be compiled into books on Jeet Kune Do, personal development, and the art of living. Yet Bruce Lee was a man born for movement, and thought alone could never be enough. Determined to defy the medical verdict, he created his own rehabilitation program. Slowly, and through intense pain, he retrained his body. Though he would live with back pain for the rest of his life, he returned to peak condition through sheer discipline and force of will. His comeback was possible in part because Bruce's approach to fitness was decades ahead of its time. In an era when weight training was used almost exclusively by bodybuilders seeking bulk, Bruce lifted for function, not size. At 5 feet 7 inches tall and only 140 pounds, he forged exceptional strength. His abilities became legendary. He could perform 51-arm chin-ups, and his explosive power astonished even elite athletes. Bruce also applied rigorous control to diet and conditioning. He took vitamins and Chinese herbs, followed strict routines, and even experimented with electric muscle stimulation, a method now used in modern physical therapy. Long before sports science became mainstream, Bruce Lee was already practicing it. By late 1970, confident that his body had recovered, Bruce travelled to Hong Kong with his young son Brandon, unaware that the trip would ignite the transformation that would turn him into a global icon. At 29, he arrived to an unexpected sight. Crowds gathered wherever he went, fans stopped him in the street, and diners whispered his name in restaurants. Television hosts sought interviews, and variety shows pleaded for on-air demonstrations of his kung fu. Hong Kong had claimed him as its own, and the philosopher who had found his voice was now stepping into the spotlight as the fighter the world was waiting to see. The source of this unexpected fame was the Green Hornet. In Hong Kong, reruns of the series were enormously popular, but audiences cared less about the masked hero. They tuned in for Kato. The show became so beloved that many viewers simply called it the Kato Show. For the first time, they saw a Chinese character portrayed with dignity and strength on American television. Kato was not a stereotype. He was a hero. That mattered deeply to Hong Kong audiences, and it planted a powerful idea in Bruce's mind. If Hollywood had not yet opened its doors, perhaps Hong Kong would. Bruce sensed that the Chinese film industry could offer him the opportunity to shape his own image and influence how the world saw Chinese culture. If he succeeded in Hong Kong, he believed that success could eventually carry him back to America on his own terms. And in Hong Kong, unlike Hollywood, he could shape the choreography, direct the action, and elevate martial arts cinema. In 1971, he signed a contract with producer Raymond Chow of Golden Harvest Productions. At that time, Chinese action films relied heavily on wirework and exaggerated stunts. Bruce rejected these techniques. He wanted authenticity, not spectacle. "Before I made my first Chinese film, Chinese flicks were considered unrealistic," he said. "There was a lot of overacting and jumping around. All in all, it didn't look real." Bruce knew he could change that. His first film with Golden Harvest, The Big Boss, was released in 1971. In it, he played Chung, a young man working in an ice factory who vows never to fight again, only to be forced into action after tragedy strikes his family. The Big Boss marked Bruce's first leading role. When the film premiered, the audience watched in silence. Bruce feared they were unimpressed. But when the lights rose, the crowd erupted in thunderous applause. They had been silent not from boredom, but from awe. They had never seen anything like Bruce Lee. The film shattered box office records across Asia, surpassing even The Sound of Music, which had been the region's previous highest-grossing film. But that record was short-lived. In 1972, Bruce's second film with Golden Harvest, Fist of Fury, broke the record again. Released in the United States as The Chinese Connection, the film told the story of Chen Zhen, a student who returns home to avenge the death of his master. The film was more intense, more emotional, and even more successful than its predecessor. Although his films contained violent combat, Bruce resisted glorifying violence. "I do not believe in playing up violence in films," he said. "I think it is unhealthy." He believed his fight scenes bordered on fantasy, representing justice, pride, and identity, not brutality for its own sake. With 2 record-breaking films in a row, Bruce received offers from competing studios. But he remained loyal to Raymond Chow and Golden Harvest. That loyalty was rewarded. For his next film, Bruce would be given unprecedented creative control. Released in late 1972, The Way of the Dragon, known in the United States as Return of the Dragon, made Bruce Lee not only its star, but also its writer, producer, and director. The story followed Tang Lung, a young man who travels to Rome to defend his cousin's restaurant from criminal forces. The film's climactic showdown, staged in the Roman Colosseum against martial arts champion Chuck Norris, became one of the most iconic fight scenes ever filmed. The movie was another tremendous success, and this time Hollywood took notice. Bruce Lee was no longer just a skilled fighter or a familiar face on television. He had become a cultural force who reshaped a generation and transformed the direction of a martial arts cinema, yet his biggest breakthrough still lay ahead. In the autumn of 1972, while filming Game of Death in Hong Kong, with his friend and former student Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a life-changing message arrived. Warner Brothers, one of Hollywood's most influential studios, wanted 31-year-old Bruce to star in a major feature film titled Enter the Dragon, the first production ever jointly created by a Hong Kong studio and a major Hollywood company. For Bruce Lee, it represented the fulfillment of a vision. He had long believed that if Western audiences could appreciate the philosophy and artistry of martial arts, they would also develop a deeper respect for Chinese culture. This belief made him a cultural ambassador, and to many in the Chinese-speaking world, a hero. Although Bruce lived in the United States, his roots remained central to his identity. He honored the traditions he was raised with and stayed close to his family. His father passed away shortly after Brandon's birth in 1965, and in time, his mother moved to Los Angeles to be near him. Many of his siblings, including his younger brother Robert, were already living in America. Robert had been a popular musician in Hong Kong before relocating to join the family in the United States. Bruce understood the importance of Enter the Dragon. "I want to let the outside world in on some of our Chinese culture," he said. He felt a profound responsibility to represent that culture with dignity. If this film was going to introduce Chinese tradition on an international stage, he would make certain it was portrayed with authenticity and respect. His work ethic, always intense, now became relentless. Bruce threw himself into every part of the production. He revised the script, choreographed the fight scenes, trained constantly, and acted as the film's central star. His schedule was punishing, and the pressure immense. In May 1973, while working on the film's sound recording in Hong Kong, Bruce collapsed from exhaustion. He recovered, but the incident revealed how far he was pushing himself. Still, he continued working at full speed. Then, on July 20th, 1973, while preparing script changes for Game of Death, Bruce complained of a headache. He took pain medication and lay down to rest. When a co-star later attempted to wake him for dinner, Bruce did not respond. Raymond Chow also tried, with no success. An ambulance rushed Bruce to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead on arrival. He was only 32. The cause was determined to be cerebral edema, swelling of the brain brought on by a reaction to the medication he had taken. The news sent shockwaves through Hong Kong and beyond. An estimated 25,000 people filled the streets for his funeral, pressing against barricades in grief, hoping for one last glimpse of their fallen hero. They filed past his casket in silence. Hong Kong mourned not just an actor, but a symbol of pride. Linda chose Seattle, the city where her life with Bruce had first begun, as his final resting place. At a second funeral there, close friends like Steve McQueen and James Coburn carried his casket, and in the years that followed, thousands would travel to his gravesite to honor the man who transformed cinema and martial arts for generations. His life was short, but his influence was profound, and the world he changed was not finished celebrating him. On the evening of August 24th, 1973, crowds packed the sidewalks outside the Chinese Theatre in Hollywood, eager for the premiere of Enter the Dragon. The first screening had sold out hours earlier, and lines for the late showing already stretched around the block as anticipation filled the air, a final testament to the legend Bruce Lee had become. Billed as the first American-produced martial arts spectacular, Enter the Dragon opened just 5 weeks after Bruce Lee's untimely death. Critical reactions were mixed, but the public response was overwhelming. Viewers around the world rushed to theatres. A film created on a modest budget of less than $1 million would go on to earn more than $200 million, becoming one of the most profitable motion pictures of its era. In the film, Bruce portrayed a Shaolin monk named Lee, sent to infiltrate a martial arts tournament held on the remote island of a corrupt former Shaolin student named Han. Han ruled through violence, protected by fighters he had gathered over years of competition, and armed with a deadly iron prosthetic. In the climactic sequence set within a maze of mirrored walls, Lee overcomes Han and exposes the criminal empire. For many viewers, these images would define martial arts cinema for a generation. By the time Enter the Dragon appeared in theatres, Bruce Lee was already an icon. Yet his impact did not end with his passing. Decades later, his legacy only grew stronger. Websites, fan organizations, and international conventions honor his memory. In 2012, the San Francisco Giants held a Bruce Lee tribute night in the city of his birth. Linda Lee threw out the first pitch, and their daughter Shannon sang the national anthem. The tribute was one of many reminders that Bruce Lee's influence had not faded. It had deepened. His legacy endures in multiple realms. In martial arts, he revolutionized Western understanding through both Kung Fu and Jeet Kune Do. In popular culture, his image and philosophy continue to inspire. Action stars still emulate him. Comic book characters draw from his teachings. Video games memorialize his likeness and movements. In the growing sport of mixed martial arts, Bruce's ideas are foundational. UFC President Dana White has called him the father of MMA, citing Bruce's belief in combining effective techniques from many disciplines and discarding the rest. Shannon Lee notes that Jeet Kune Do is not the same as modern MMA, but she agrees the title is fair. Her father, she explains, was the first global voice to insist that a complete fighter must remain free from rigid styles. Bruce Lee did more than influence athletes. He connected cultures. He introduced centuries-old Chinese martial traditions to Western audiences, and he brought modern cinematic techniques to the East. Under the sky, under the heavens, there is but one family, he once said. It just so happens that people are different. He is credited with creating a new film genre, and is widely regarded as one of history's greatest martial artists. He was also a philosopher, a teacher, a poet, and an actor, all within a life that lasted only 32 years. At his funeral in Seattle, Linda Lee reflected on the intensity and purpose with which he lived. He lived every day as a day of discovery, she said. His 32 years were full of living. He believed that man struggles to find a life outside himself, not realizing that the life he seeks is within him. Bruce Lee's time on Earth was brief, but his impact was permanent. His art, his ideas, and his spirit transcended borders and generations. The dragon's fire did not extinguish. It continues to burn, illuminating lives around the world.